All right, welcome. We have a very exciting Twice Exceptional panel here today. I'm Dr. Alan Dolan. I'm the Director of Gifted Education. Maria, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Maria Messer, Executive Director of Special Education.
Matt, how about you?
Yep. Hi, I'm Matt Cormier. I am the district's 504 coordinator.
And we're very excited to have you here today. We have received a number of questions that deal with various parts of being twice exceptional and supporting our twice exceptional students. This is an important topic to us. So we have done our best to go through all of the questions, and we will provide some answers and just have a great conversation about twice exceptional and the way we support twice exceptional students in Jeffco. All right, I'll start with some just level setting and some definitions. In Colorado, we have the Exceptional Children's Education Act, ECEA, and that defines a 2E learner as somebody who is a gifted student and then also qualifies as either with a disability, or so that would be an IEP, or they would qualify to receive services from a 504. So in really simple language, 2E equals either an ALP plus an IEP or an ALP plus a 504. And then just to give you guys an idea of how common that is in Jeffco, we have about 10,000 students on IEPs in Jeffco. That's about 13% of our total student population. We have a little over 8,800 students on an ALP, so they're identified as GT. So that's pretty close to 11.6% of our district population. And then if you take those students and you look at the ones that have either an IEP or a 504, that adds up to about 13.3%. Out of that 1180, we have 816 students that have a 504 and 365 on an IEP. Like I said earlier, we really appreciate all of the questions that were submitted. We had some great questions. We did have some questions that were specific to certain students or certain schools, and this isn't the format really to be able to discuss that, but we did take all of the other questions and we generated some themes, and we did the best we could to try to sort those into some manageable content for us to talk about today. All right, so I'm going to go over the themes really quick and then we're going to get started. The first theme was identification and assessment of 2E students. The second was supporting and accommodations for those 2E students. There was a theme about interdepartmental communication and collaboration. There was quite a few questions about parent education and resources to help you advocate for your child. There were some questions related to transitions. And then the last topic that we identified as a theme was the mental health needs of our 2E students. So Matt, when you're thinking about identification and assessment of 2E students, what do you think of?
Well, I think the first thing that's important to remember is this concept of how important name, strength, need is, right? We want to know all of our students by name, their strength and need. And why I feel so passionate about this is I don't want the need part to ever get lost for a student who has an ALP, right? We know the strength. The strength is so pronounced there. And so, but what can live alongside with the strength is a need. So from a 504 standpoint, and I hope nobody is like, oh my gosh, he got so wonky. There's so much about the law there. So I'll just do my best to not be terribly wonky, but I love this stuff. So any human can be identified as having an impairment, right? And so there is some impairments that we see more frequently than others, right? In Jeffco, more than 50% of 504s have the letters ADHD in them. It's probably the most common impairment. And so I'm sure there's families watching this that say, I know that one very, very well. So that's the impairment. But it's not necessarily a disability. it only becomes a disability under Section 504 if the impairment substantially limits one or more of life's major activities. Now, what you just heard there is actually very, very broad. The way that the law works is that if there's an impairment that substantially limits any of life's major activities, then a student is determined to be disabled under the law, and they are protected because they have a disability. And then after that, we look to determine, okay, if we have an impairment that substantially limits, which means the student's disabled, do they require the school to do something? Do they require supports? And so, number one, as we think about this identification, parents are so important to the conversation. You're going to give us a full picture of your child so that we not only understand the strength, but we understand the need that you see. And so as identification, it could be as simple as that there is a diagnosis that helps us understand the impairment, and then we collect data about how it substantially limits. The other piece to consider is you don't have to have a diagnosis to determine whether a person is impaired or has a disability. And so for identification, we might just have a suspicion of an impairment. And so we collect data to better understand the impairment and if it is substantially limiting a major life activity. And then I think it's always important that we take into account you can have strengths and still need supports to have equal access. And so, but we'll kind of cover more of that here in the future when we talk about accommodation. So yeah, again, I hope that wasn't too wonky, and I hope that provides some clarity about how we determine disability.
What I would
Yeah.
add to Matt over one of the differences between the major difference between a 504 support plan and an IEP support plan is what is found in that evaluation. If that evaluation determines that a student does qualify for an educational disability under IDEA, and requires specialized instruction from a special education provider, that's the difference. Is a lot of students can be successful accessing their education with some accommodations. However, if they do need that extra layer of specialized instruction from a licensed provider, that's where the IEP comes in. And that's why perhaps on a couple of slides before, let me go back, you'll see here that we have far more students, far more twice exceptional students who qualify for a support plan, the 504 support plan, than that additional layer of an IEP.
Yeah, such a good point.
Thank you to both of you. I think that was very helpful. I think the next thing for us to talk about is then once we have that identification of the twice exceptionality, then let's talk a little bit about what supports and accommodations are available for those students in Jeffco.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. Like I think it's really important that we understand that supports, accommodations, modifications, related services, that they are unique to that student. You know, we never want to be creating, just copy and pasting supports generically. We want to think about that individual student and what their needs are. I think it's really important to understand the strengths when we consider support. So, right, as we think about crafting supports, we might often think about the deficit, right? That there's an impact to executive functioning skills, right? We see an impact to executive functioning skills. So we want to provide these supports to help the student gain skills. And and I often think about the stages of a student's support plan. Your support plan when you're age 7, let's hope it looks different than when that student is age 17, right? One of the things that we do is provide supports that help kids gain skills, coping skills and strategies so that they don't need those same supports as they get older. And I often will say to folks that, you know, if you're a 7-year-old with ADHD, you are going to be a 47-year-old with ADHD. That's the fact. We generally write 504s for chronic impairments of lifelong duration. So what happens is as you get older, you gain coping skills and you gain strategies, and you don't need the same support. So number one, I got to say, it's got to be unique to that student and what they need. Secondarily, let's think about the strengths. Like I always ask schools to consider what are the students' strengths and how do we build an accommodation that supports a strength. And somebody might be thinking, okay, Matt, give me an example. I think the biggest one would be a modality, the way a student shows they understand. Right. And I often give the example of if the intention of the activity is to show how well you write a 5-paragraph essay, then everybody writes a 5-paragraph essay. But if the intention of the activity is the causes of something, causes of the Revolutionary War, I want a student with strengths in a particular area to have those be considered, to have it be able to modify the way that they show. So there's a great example of thinking about a student's strength areas in how they show their understanding of skills. And I've gone on too long, so I'll hand it back over to either of you two to add thoughts.
I was just thinking, Matt, when you were saying that, is a student who struggles with writing or typing or grammar or sentence structure, those things, that if those are the intention of an activity, they would be assessed on that. However, if they, like the Revolutionary War, you said, perhaps they're given an opportunity to present or to talk through what their understanding of the causes of that war are, that are different than the act of writing, if that is their struggle. That is an appropriate accommodation in a 504 or an IEP plan.
Yeah, for certain. And it's so hard, as we talk about, to give an example, like I want to stray away from that because every kid is unique. But if we think about, right, a student with an ALP, if I was to use the example of a student with an ALP who was just a perfectionist, right? And so there is a piece of that impairment which causes them to struggle to get things in on time because of this perfectionist quality. I would want a school to think about how to support them through that, and it may look at one time as like extended time. It may look at another time as providing some mental health support to say, hey, these feelings of perfectionism, let's work through that because that's something we want to have you build skills around so that it helps you as an adult, because that's not going to help you. And so thinking about different times, the supports in their life, what's needed at that moment, I think is really key.
Great.
Thank you to both of you. I think the next topic on our list here is the interdepartmental communication and collaboration, and just the way that all of our teams work together and the way that the three of us work together. Who would like to start with this topic?
I can start. I think it's really important to understand that every building every Jeffco building has like a bucket of support. And so every building has a special education team, every building has a 504 coordinator or team lead, and every school has access to a GT resource teacher. So when we have these complex students with all of these strengths and needs that work together in very, very unique ways, there are experts in our buildings that not only know our students, but also the community and how they're working together. And so I guess I would say, yes, we also have layers of collaboration and communication here at the district level. However, we also encourage collaboration and communication with our professionals in the building. So when you're sitting in an IEP meeting, you maybe have a GT resource teacher or someone that knows the student's strengths at the table that may look different from another meeting. So that's what I would say about what you might see in an interdepartmental communication and collaboration meeting.
I think that's a great point, and obviously that would also apply to a 504 meeting as well. Matt, did you have any other thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I am a very, I'll just say, I'm a very proud Jeffco employee and I've worked here for over 20 years. And the one thing I will say about Jeffco is it's a big district that gets small very quickly. And what I mean by that is that when, as Maria said, those conversations are so powerful when they're at the school site and there are experts there, just as she said. And when folks at the school site say, you know what, this is one that we could use a thought partner on. This Jeffco gets small really quickly. Everybody in roles in schools have people that they can call who think about things at a 40,000 foot view of 70 plus thousand kids who have more experiences working with different communities and can bring different thoughts to that conversation. So, I think we're all really fortunate in that we're raising kids and have got students in this district that can provide all these extra supports at the school site.
Yeah, I agree, and I definitely appreciate those thoughts. The next topic we have on our list here is parent education and resources to help parents advocate for their children. Maria, did you want to mention something that we have coming up with this?
Sure. I think first when I think about advocating for your child, I think it goes back, and you'll hear this both in this topic and in transitions, is really leaning on the professionals you have closest to you in your building teams, and you're advocating for your student in your building, in your community. We do have an exciting opportunity. We are in the middle of planning for a Parents Encouraging Parents event that Jeffco is putting on in April. So I would encourage you to watch for information on that. It's a PEP conference. You'll often hear it called. CDE offers several PEP conferences throughout the year. And we're going to take that idea and do a Jeffco resource fair where families can come and get information. And it's like a seminar style, go to different learning sessions around kids on IEPs and kids that are gifted and perhaps kids that are on 504 plans as well. So you're able to access some of those resources to help your toolbox grow.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a great opportunity. So look for more information for that for sure. We had a lot of questions about transitions, and I know that's been a topic of a lot of angst for a lot of people. So Matt, do you want to share some ideas about transitions?
Yeah, I do. I think I'm going to take us back to that parent advocacy piece too, because I wanted to add that I think parents, there's a really important component here of just how valuable your experience with your child, with your treasure is to the conversation. And so know that what we see is that sometimes the school's experience for your child is different than the home experience for your child. And what I mean by that is that your child to the teachers at the school seems to be like, wow, just an incredible student. I would take 30 more of her or him at any time. Incredible. And what the teachers don't see is that your child might be masking certain feelings at school, holding it together, another way to say it. And as soon as they get home into what feels like a safer environment, it looks very different. And you see the manifestations of the impairment in different ways. And I think that's a really key piece to understand is that you bring through the conversations what your experience is. And in regards to advocacy, we want you to know that Jeffco is set up, as you know, in articulation areas. And so elementary schools traditionally will roll to a middle school, which rolls to a high school. And those principals, they talk. they meet together because they know they're supporting a community. And above those principals is a community superintendent. And Jeffco has really been wise in connecting that a community superintendent is attached to articulation areas. So this is a person who understands, from pre-K all the way to 12th grade. So really wanted to highlight that part of advocacy. And yeah, it's important to start at the school site with the staff that are closest to your child. And if that doesn't work, go to the principal. And if that, then you can go to the community superintendent. There's always avenues for advocacy. I think for transitions, I always think transitions in a number of different ways. One way is elementary to middle to high school, right? One way to think about that is coursework. So at an elementary school to middle school, the transition might look like your child had one or two teachers, one teacher, and then specials teachers. And then they go into a middle school and it's 6 or 7 teachers, and you immediately see the impacts of those executive functioning deficits, of the feelings of anxiety. And I've always said that first semester of 6th grade of middle school is such an important transition to know, do we have the right supports in place? The transition I see often from middle school to high school is about taking those really high level classes, those AP level classes, college level classes. And the one thing I want to stress, and I'll let Maria add as well, is that equal access means your kid has equal access to those classes. The idea that they want to take an AP class and need support in that AP class is absolutely equal access. And so want to make sure that transition, that they're supported at that time. And then, I go back to this idea of a transition from IEP to 504 to graduation. Often if parents call me and say, I'm a little worried because the school team is saying my kid may no longer, doesn't look like my kid's going to qualify for an IEP, or they don't qualify for an IEP. That's more the way to say it. And I'm concerned about that. And I often say to a parent, like, this is a time to throw a party, because what it means is a group of professionals looked at data and said, your kid with a disability no longer needs specialized instruction from a special ed teacher. What an incredible moment in your child's development. It doesn't mean your kid doesn't need supports, possibly through a 504, you probably through a 504. And then as your kid has a 504, I mentioned this before, every time something changes in that 504, maybe you take out a support. Why? Because your kid has gained the coping skills and the strategies. It's party time, and leading up to a moment where your kid in 11th and 12th grade you can see has gained so many coping skills and strategies to be successful for the next level. So I've talked way too long, but I see transitions in all those areas.
I love what you said, that it is a celebration, and it so often is a celebration, and it also triggers a lot of anxiety because it is different, and students perhaps are transitioning from an adult-led or teacher-led plan through an IEP to a self-advocacy plan, and making sure they're getting their accommodations, right? So they're learning to advocate and ask for what they need.
Yeah.
In these higher level classes, which is a skill.
Yep.
In and of itself. So it is a transition and also just a huge celebration. And it's also hard. I don't want to lose that. I think of transitions they are exciting and they are hard. And again, I would just say, because the beauty of Jeffco is aligned by articulation area, that our professionals are talking from all of those levels, elementary to middle and middle to high, to just make sure that we're setting the stage for each student to be successful at the next level. So.
Yeah.
Alan, somehow you got muted.
Let's try this again. I think there's a lot of power in what both of you were mentioning there. So thank you for your thoughts there. I think, it is a celebration and it can be difficult. And we also need to remember this is one of many transitions throughout their life that they're going to go through as well. So The last topic we had on our list here is the mental health needs of twice exceptional students. There's a lot of research that shows they are pronounced. There are some definite needs at times for different supports for mental health for our twice exceptional students. I can tell you from my experience coming from other districts and from other roles, I've always been very impressed with the commitment that Jefferson County has to providing that support. The mental health support here, I think, has been phenomenal compared to other districts. With that in mind, either one of you, who would like to talk about the supports we have and the different possible needs for mental health of twice exceptional students here in Jeffco?
I can start, and then I am going to invite Matt to share a little bit more complexity in our students who are on a 504 plan who may need some mental health support. For an IEP, it's a little bit more clear. At some point in the student's education, they have qualified for an educational disability and are getting specialized instruction by a professional. So in that case, a student could get mental health supports embedded into their IEP if it's related to their disability. I will also say that the special education mental health provider is only one member of a mental health team in a building. So there are several professionals that wrap around our student bodies to provide mental health supports. But I want to invite Matt to talk a little bit more about our complex learners who aren't on an IEP and don't have that specialized instruction, but could potentially still need the support of a mental health provider.
Yeah, it's interesting because I imagine how many people are watching this video and thinking, you're about to be talking about my kiddo, right? And I believe that to be something that quite a few people are thinking. And so, number one, I want to say to parents, like, you're deputized, right? You're deputized into being the advocate for your kid. I go back to what I've mentioned before, is that sometimes the school staff doesn't see what you see, and you might not recognize that, and they don't recognize what you're seeing. And so that's that communication is really key, and helping them to understand the full picture of your child, right? We don't want to see your child as at home and at school. Your child is really strong. Your child has needs. This is one child, and we want to understand the fullness of your child. So, number one message: advocate, educate, communicate with the staff so that they know who your kid is. And when we recognize that students, depending on their age and depending on their unique needs, they're going to need different things. And so there's a continuum that maybe what your kiddo needs is just an opportunity to take a break, that it could be as simple as a break. Maybe it's that they need to take a break with a trusted adult. Maybe it's that they need to take a break, not with just a trusted adult, but a trusted adult who is trained as a mental health provider. Maybe we go to the extent of saying that they actually need to meet weekly with a mental health provider to support them with these feelings. And I mention all of those pieces because all of those pieces are possible through a 504. All of those pieces are possible for your kid who looks so incredibly academically strong in the school building. And you see how much that weighs on them at home and what they bring home in regards to how long it takes them to do work, how much they have that perfectionist quality that they break down around it. And so I take it back to when we often say around this work is that we're doing incredible mental health work as we support kids with these plans. And so, yeah, I just go back to asking you to help the school recognize the full story of your child, and the school absolutely needs to consider that full story as we consider the supports that we put in place, which is a continuum, depending on the need now, depending on the age, and it can change because all these plans are living documents.
Thank you. I think that's very, very wise words for sure. So those are our themes. I really appreciate both of you and your thoughts and your great conversation. I think one of our takeaways from this conversation that I had was just the importance of getting to know that the supports that are there for your student, get to know whether it's a 504 team lead or coordinator, the SPED staff, if that applies, the resource teacher that can help support your student at that school. Get to know those folks. Maria mentioned the PEP conference. We're very excited about that in April. Watch out for more information on that. Before we sign off here, Matt or Maria, are there any other thoughts that either one of you have that you'd like to share?
Ellen, I want to thank your team for sending out and getting these questions and bringing us together to talk about these. We don't get this opportunity enough, but it's so important for us to bring it down back to our student experience and what our students are experiencing in our Jeffco schools, and make sure we're hitting the mark for our more complex learners and our twice exceptional learners. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate something that Maria said, and you've heard here and seen on the screen, the power of the folks at your child's school that always start with those conversations, and they're experts in every school and they're passionate administrators in those schools. And so start there, because that place that is closest to your child is where I would always go with your education, your advocacy, with your communication. Go there and work through those channels.
Thank you. Well, we really appreciate all of you for sending questions in. We appreciate everybody who's watched this video online, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thanks.